say all the time that when it comes to our money, we are just dealing with various financial tools. And like any other tool that we use, it's really important that we understand what that tool is designed to do. So a lot of people out there get a financial tool called a restricted stock unit, but I don't think we really understand what that tool is designed for. So at its core, an RSU is something that can be granted to you by the company that you work for. And the easiest way, I think, to understand this tool is to focus on the letters. So let's start with S. S is for stock, stock in the company that you work for. The U is for unit. Notice I'm not saying share here, I'm saying unit. Stock is issued in shares, but this isn't a stock. It's a unit, which is a promise to become a stock later. And the R stands for restricted. Restricted until certain conditions are met. And so that leaves us with RSU, restricted stock unit. A unit, not a share, that becomes real stock in a company that you work for at a later date if you meet certain conditions. And what are these conditions? Well, the technical term here is vesting requirements, and they can take a number of different characteristics, but the way it typically works is that you have to work at the company for a certain amount of years. More times than not is you have to work there for about 4 years before all your RSUs become real stock. And it usually works like this. You get a RSU granted to you on a certain date, and that can be any date. You can get an RSU grant any time, really. A year after that date, 25% of the RSUs will become real stock. 2 years, 50% will become real stock, and then 3 years, 75, so on, so on. The key here, though, is that an RSU is part of your pay package. It's part of your compensation. And you're probably thinking, man, that seems like a very complicated way for a company to pay their employees. So why do companies do it this way? Well, there's 3 main reasons. Number 1 is going to be cash conservation. An RSU lets the company pay their employees in stock as opposed to cash. Therefore, that cash can be used to invest in areas for growth. Second is going to be for alignment purposes. If you give an employee stock, that employee is going to be invested in the company in a very real way. If the company does well, the employee does well. Third is retention. The RSU isn't stock, it's a unit to get stock later. So you don't get the stock right away. You have to stay in the company for a certain amount of time or hit other performance objectives before that unit becomes a stock. And that way we often call them golden handcuffs, because if you leave the company, you lose out on those shares that were promised as part of your compensation package. And that idea that you don't get the stock until you stay there for a certain amount of time must be understood very well, because the second that unit becomes a stock, it becomes taxable. Not when the employer grants you the RSUs, not after you get your shares and you decide to sell them. The second the RSU actually becomes a real stock, it is considered income and must be taxed as such. That key in itself gets people into a lot of problems.